very end. Before we get started, I would like to bring up Anthony Bellin from Hawks, as well as our corporate partner, who will bring greetings to you this morning. Anthony.
Good morning. Hawks Learning Systems is a truly honored partner with AMATYC as a corporate sponsor. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to be part of such a wonderful organization. Hawks has been participating in AMATYC since the late 1980s and as the first to come out with computer-based tutorial and assessment software of its kind for mathematics. We've been able to expand throughout the US by being a part of AMATYC. We truly value our relationship with AMATYC and all of its members. Thanks to all of you for attending this year's conference and for your support of the exhibitors and sponsors. Enjoy the rest of the conference and your time in my hometown, Austin.
Once again, thanks to Hawks for their support, not only this year, but in all the years. It is my pleasure to announce the 2009-2011 Executive Board. Myself as president. We have Jim Rosnowski as the president-elect, and Ricky Blair as our immediate past president. Mike Hardy, treasurer. Pauline Chow, secretary. Jane Tanner, Northeast Regional Vice President. Ruth Collins, Mid-Atlantic Vice President. Donna Say, Southeast Regional Vice President. Nancy Sattler, Midwest Regional Vice President. Nancy has groupies. Gene Woody, Southwest Regional Vice President. Steve Wilson, Central Region Vice President. Bruce Yoshiwara, West Region Vice President. And Stefan Barato, Northwest Regional Vice President. It's been my honor to serve with these individuals for the last 2 years. They're an outstanding group of mathematics educators and very dedicated to the organization. And I just want to give them a big thank you from me because we've done a lot in the last 2 years and it's been a great learning experience for all of us. So thank you to all the board members. Continuing, where we have, AMATYC has 43 affiliates, and we have many of the affiliate presidents here. So if you're an affiliate president, please stand up and be acknowledged. We really appreciate the work of all the affiliate presidents, and many of us started as affiliate presidents in our home states. The AMATYC office, Beverly Vance, office director, Christine Schott, publications director, and Christy Hunsucker, accounting director, sitting right over there. You know, you could sit right underneath your picture there and it would be, but they have been absolutely invaluable in my 2 years as president with all their help and all their resources and all of their expertise with getting things done and really helping to make the office and the conference run very, very smoothly. So I am very much indebted to all of their help throughout the last 2 years. Our executive directors, Cheryl Cleaves and Patrick Winters. Our academic committee chairs, Kathy Almy, developmental math, Sean Simpson, division and department issues, Mary Beth Orange, innovative teaching and learning, Ned Schillo, mathematics for AAS programs, Sandy Poinsett, mathematics intensive, and John Clement, statistics. Connie Buller, placement and assessment, Kendall Jacobs, teacher preparation, and April Strom, research and mathematics education in 2-year colleges. Thank you very much to our academic committee chairs. Let's give them a round of applause. I'd also like, and many of you also participate in our Student Math League each year. Many of you are moderators at your local colleges. I would like to invite Susan Strickland, the Student Math League Coordinator, and Steve Blasberg, our Student Math League Test Developer, who will present this year's awards.
Wow, it's bright up here. Good morning. The Student Mathematics League involves much more than 2 tests given each academic year. Beginning in the summer, the Test Development Committee, under the direction of Steve Blasberg, began analyzing and selecting problems for the upcoming year. Would the members of the Test Development Committee please rise so we can applaud you for your efforts? Many of the questions are submitted by the local test moderators. In addition, they are responsible for giving, grading, and recording the results of the tests. Would all the moderators please rise and be recognized? In the summer, the top female scorer in each region is recognized by the Association of Women in Mathematics, and the top scoring student from each region is recognized by Mu Alpha Theta. But there are 3 very special people who deserve very special thanks for their work. These are in alphabetical order, not in order of importance. Steve Blasberg for organizing the actual tests, Christine Schott for seeing that the award plaques are made, and Beverly Vance, who patiently handles the registrations. The first awards today are for the Faculty Mathematics League, which was given to 51 eager but somewhat nervous participants yesterday. Our 3rd place winner for the Faculty Math League is a person who made it to the top 3 last year. It is Mary Pierce from Wake Tech in the Northeast region. That makes 3 times that a woman in the history of Faculty Math League has placed in the top 3, and this is the 2nd time that Mary has been in that position. I was the first. Shameless self-promotion. Our 2nd place winner is a person who has participated in every single Faculty Math League competition. That's been 8. That's TJ Duda from Columbus State in the Midwest region. This year, Kay Weiss from Mu Alpha Theta has generously donated a TI Inspire for the highest scorer. And that goes to Sean Simpson from Westchester Community College in the Northeast region. If he is here, I have his Inspire. If he could come up, please. No? I see Steve Wilson holding the plexiglass statue. That's the next to go, sorry. The coveted plexiglass statue for the winning... Jane, I didn't announce your name yet. Oh my. The coveted plexiglass statue for the winning regional team goes to the Northeast region. Jane Tanner accepted. This is really a wild competition. The Glenn Smith Team Award is given annually to the team with the highest combined score after both rounds. The winning team for the Student Math League 2010-2011 competition is West Valley College. Accepting the award is Chris Dyer. But the most important award today is the Charles Miller Memorial Scholarship, given annually to the qualifying student with the highest combined score at the end of both rounds. The scholarship is generously funded by Pearson Education. Here to give the award is Maureen O'Connor from Pearson, and here to accept the award on behalf of our scholarship winner is Fawn Maddox.
Good morning. And the winner is Min Dang from Mission College. He will be attending San Jose State next semester.
Thank you.
Thanks to Sue and Steve for all the work they do, not only with the Student Math League, but the Faculty Math League. Among the vice presidents during the board meeting, there's a lot of trash talking about who is going to take home the coveted plexiglass trophy each year. Continuing on with our presentations this morning, there we go. Yeah, a couple more. There we go. Come on, a couple more. I think that's as far back as we go then. But next we have Maria Anderson, who has been our professional development coordinator and who's done all the work on the webinars this year. Joyce Frisky, who's the affiliate website coordinator. Jim Ham, the webmaster. George Alexander, our online resource director. And talking about our mathematic educator, we have Pete Wildman, our editor, and Jim Rosnowski, production manager, for just a couple more days. Okie dokes. Oh, you gotta love technology sometimes. Very important, we have Laura Watkins, our AMATYC Project Access Coordinator. She's done a great job in her first year. And well, let's have all the current cohort 7 and cohort 8 Access Fellows please stand. And anyone else who was an Access Fellow from cohort 1 through 6, please stand. Great that you could still be here. Our 2 Carnegie liaisons, Julie Phelps is our Pathways Networking Liaison, and Jack Rotman is the Pathways Content Liaison to the Carnegie Statway and Quantway project. And before we talk about our past presidents, I think I missed Dana Callan for our grants coordinator and Pat Rhodes as professional networking coordinator, so I'd like to acknowledge them as well. Certainly our AMATYC past presidents seated up here at the front are very important to our organization. They've been very important to me as well. You know, they've all been very helpful if I had a question or needed some advice. And never once did I hear things like, you know, when I was AMATYC president, we had to walk 6 miles uphill to the delegate assembly, so. But today we have Steve Rodi, Phil Mailer, Wanda Gardner, Sadie Bragg, Marilyn Mays, Ricky Blair. Judy Ackerman was here earlier but could not stay for today, as well as Kathy Maurer. So let's give a big round of applause for our past presidents. Our conference. Have you all enjoyed your conference here so far? There's a lot of people who do a lot of work to make this conference as successful as it is, and they are led by Kevin Doctor. I don't know where you know Kevin. You've seen him running around here before. And I must publicly apologize because last year I forgot to put Judy Williams on here, so I apologize, Judy. I've known you forever, but Judy Williams is our assistant conference coordinator as well. So thank you, Kevin and Judy. Louise Olshan, our advertising chair, Frank Goulard, exhibits chair, Darlene Winnington, presider chair, and Linda Kadama, roommate network director. Our conference program committee headed up by Wanda Gardner, who is program coordinator, and the members of her program review committee, Lois Martin, Rob Ebby, Ernie Danforth, Martha Morrow Chaloup, and Marjorie Thrall Moeller, plus all of the academic committee chairs. So give them all a round of applause. And our 2011 local events coordinator, Honey Kirk. Honey, please come forward. Honey, we are very appreciative of all the efforts that you and your committee have gone through to make this such a successful conference. We know sometimes it's very, very difficult with how spread out everybody is, but you've done a great job of making us feel welcome and helping us to keep Austin weird. So thank you very much for all of your efforts this year, and we appreciate everything on behalf of the board and the membership. It's been great, and we all owe you a round of applause for all of your work. Thank you.
I'd just like to acknowledge my committee, my local Austinite person, Ann Praderis, the rest of my committee from all over Texas, and my friends from San Antonio who didn't say yes, they just joined me. And also my husband. Thanks for letting me do this. He doesn't let me do anything. I need to rephrase that. Thanks for your supporting me.
And it's really a shame how they've just kind of blended into the crowd and you really haven't been able to tell who they are, so. Just a few more. It is my pleasure to announce the 2012-2013 Executive Board. Myself will be past president. Jim Rosnowski will be president. Nancy Sattler, president-elect. Just waiting for her groupies over there to respond. Margie Hobbs will be treasurer, Mary Beth Orange, secretary, Jane Tanner, Northeast Regional Vice President, Chris Allgaier, Mid-Atlantic Regional Vice President. Chris has groupies too. Annette Cook, Southeast Regional VP, Jim Ham, Midwest Regional Vice President, Kate Kozak, Southwest Regional Vice President, Nicole Lang, Central Region Vice President. And a slide that I didn't have to change, Bruce Yoshiwara, West Regional Vice President, and Stefan Barato, Northwest Regional Vice President. So I know Jim will look forward to working with all of them in the next 2 years. So thank you for all for voting. Now, I'd like to make 2 more presentations. I would like to call up President-elect Jim Rosnowski to the podium. Jim, on behalf of AMATYC, I'd like to present you with this plaque. And the nice thing about it is you get your president's plaque before you take office, so you can put it on your door, and when you close it, people can stay out that way. But it's my honor to present this plaque to you and to welcome you into the President's Club. And I know you'll do a great job as president. He's done a great job as a vice president, in all his work with the Journal, and a great job as president-elect. And I think AMATYC is well served for the next 2 years with Jim on board. Photo op. Yeah, do that.
I joined the board 8 years ago. Rob was already on the board, and we've worked together since then in a number of different capacities. I was Midwest VP, he was Mid-Atlantic VP, he's been Executive Director of External Operations, now as President and President-elect, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. On behalf of the current board, I'd like to thank Rob for all he's done over the last 2 years, and it is my honor to present him his presidential or past presidential medal.
Thank you very much. Like I said, the honor has been mine. I'd also like to call up past President Ricky Blair. I've known Ricky for a long, long time. We started working together officially when I was the conference chairperson for Pittsburgh and she was the silver anniversary planner. SAP. Their initials, not mine. But we've had a good time working together since that point in time, and we've had a very, very rich and rewarding time working together on the board. She's been a great mentor, great friend, but basically she is just passionate about two-year college mathematics education, and that is very clear with her dedication and her commitment to the AMATYC board and the organization. And we are all better for her being here and being so involved and being so concerned with the organization and what we are doing. And she's opened so many doors for all of us as two-year college mathematics educators. It's my pleasure to present to her her certificate for her lifetime membership in AMATYC. So please help me honor Ricky Blair by a huge round of applause. It's up to you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He's saying, go ahead. He said I wasn't supposed to say anything.
Like that's ever stopped you.
Well, that would be true, and I'm really in tears right now for your thanks just now. And I think you all know, and I want to say it one more time, it's been my privilege to stand in these shoes and represent you and the two-year college math community around the country and within this organization. And I just thank you for the opportunity. I don't know what else to say. I'm in tears. So thanks.
I didn't want to
You got a plaque too.
I didn't want to
You got a plaque. All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce our, and I did forget one, I think I forget one other person on the slides when they didn't come up. Kate Kozak is also our newsletter editor for the current time. She's done a great job. I would like, and if I forgot anybody else, I apologize ahead of time. I'll get you at closing session tomorrow. I would like to introduce Terri Manning, our breakfast speaker. She is the Associate Vice President for Institutional Research and Assistant to the Executive Vice President. She also serves as the director of the Center for Applied Research at Central Piedmont Community College. To date, Terri has done over 80 keynote presentations on this topic at national meetings for other colleges across the country and local businesses. She has worked with the AACC training their commissions on future issues that are relevant to community colleges. She has also been a keynote speaker for the League of Innovation in the community college and is currently a part of their Speakers Bureau. Terri received her doctorate in higher education from Oklahoma State University. She has been at CPCC since 1998, but before that, she was a full-time graduate faculty at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte for 7.5 years, at Oklahoma State University for 2 years, and part-time at Tulsa Community College for 7 years. She is involved locally, regionally, and nationally with multiple agencies, projects, and initiatives. This presentation focuses on the generation of children born between 1982 and 2002, some 81 million children who have entered K through 12, college, and the workforce. This generation will replace the baby boomers as they retire. The millennials have different characteristics than any generation before them, and in order to serve them better, K through 12 education and colleges and universities are having to change the way they do business. So here to enlighten us of what we should do with our students is Dr. Terri Manning.
Yeah. My clicker needs to go back. Here, hold it. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. That's off, right? They fast-forwarded my thing through here. I've got to get back. Before I get started, I want you to know these slides have a lot of information on them, and they're going to be posted. So you don't need to take any notes. You can just listen. And they're videotaping, and they're going to insert. Here we go. Yes. Okay, now. There we go. They're going to insert the video in the slide presentation, so I think you can also get access to that if you would like to. I've done a lot of work around the millennial generation and talking to faculty more than anybody else about issues with generations in the classroom. And the unique thing about community colleges is that you don't just have one generation in the classroom, you have all generations in the classroom. But the fastest growing group of students across the country is the millennial generation, which is basically the group under 30. That are attending right now, and most colleges and universities have gotten up to, well, community colleges, up to 70 to 80% of their students are in this generation. And so while they were just a small number, you know, we could just kind of ignore them, but now they're the majority of our students, and there are some issues that we're having with them, some of their ideas, their expectations. And so we're going to spend some time today just talking about what led us up to creating a generation like the millennial generation, and how they behave and some of the issues that we're having with them in the classroom. So I always start back with previous generations and kind of move forward and explain a little bit about generations, period. And I want you to know I don't believe that all people born in one generation are exactly the same, because they're not. They have a lot of different characteristics and values and the way they were raised, and you know, things that went on and at the time they were growing up will make a difference in their personalities. But basically, generations consist of about a 20-year age span, and demographers don't always agree when one stops and the next one begins, but they're sort of close. They do have somewhat of a unique set of values, and when you think about it, it has to do with what went on in life at the time they were young children and when they were adolescents and young adults. So in other words, those of you who have parents or grandparents who grew up during the Great Depression, they have very different ideas about saving money and about keeping every little bitty thing they have in case they might need it for the future. But the baby boomers grew up kind of in an economic boom, and our whole idea about life in general is very different than the generation that came before us. And so that typically happens with generations is that a generation raises you, and you kind of say, no, I don't want to be like them, So you kind of do things differently, and you say, I will never raise my children the way my parents raised me. And so you don't raise your children the way your parents raised you, which is why generations kind of kind of flip, flop, and they go back and forth, because pretty soon whoever you raise is going to say, oh, I'm not raising my kids the way my parents raised me, and they're going to go back to raising their kids like your parents raised you. So we kind of end up with this going round and round. But generations do have, whoever's in power, and you know who's in power right now, right? Baby boomers are in power right now. And so they rule the world. Their ethic is the one we all have to deal with. The fact that a full day's work is 12 hours, not 8, and that if you only work 40 hours a week, you're a slacker, is kind of a baby boomer thing. No one else has that value, by the way, and none of them want that value, by the way. And so, but because of the fact that we're sort of in power right now, we tend to see ourselves as a standard of comparison. And people who don't behave and act like us you don't have any work ethic, because you're not like me. So they do have some way in which their standards kind of are pushed off to the generations below them, which aren't necessarily very well accepted. Generations have 4 basic characteristics. They're idealistic, they're civic, they're reactive, or they're adaptive. And they don't always, just go in a set order, but you tend to have certain ones come after certain other generations. So I want to back up a little bit and just talk, because I have to prepare, sort of walk you through why we have a generation like the millennials, because it has everything to do with the few generations that came before them. So we have a few faculty members still around who are members of the veteran generation, which was the group born between about 1925 and 1942. They are usually about the youngest of them around 68, but they are up to about 86 years old. So we do have some people that just aren't retiring. They're just keeping teaching, or they're teaching. We have a lot of people on our part-time roles who are in their late 60s and early 70s. So they're still around. We don't have very many students in this age group anymore. States who have programs for senior citizens, though, where you can come for free, you may have a few in your class, but we don't have too many of these in education right now. But they were children of the Great Depression. They grew up really not knowing where their next meal came from, wearing hand-me-down clothes. Very close families, though. They were very poor. Life was very hard, but they really didn't know it. They were very happy. They thought they had a great childhood. They were no sooner coming, up in their adolescence through the Depression and World War II starts, and they were off to war. And so they didn't come back from the war until they were in their late 20s, a lot of them. And so they lost a lot of that fancy-free, frivolous adolescence that people get to have. And they came back and immediately started working. They got married and started having children. And they are very good at working within organizations to make everything better for the good of the whole. They're not change agents, really. They don't strive to do a lot of things differently. They try to just improve things to make them better for everybody all around. Now, because of the fact that their childhood was like it was, and they went off to war and came back, they also invented the midlife crisis. We had never had a generation go through a midlife crisis until this generation got up to be in their 40s. And they're the ones who developed the midlife crisis. They had a wonderful childhood, though. They were raised by the GI generation, which was a civic, participatory generation. Large families, strong extended families. They tended to all live in the same home with the grandparents or on the same block where you grew up with all your aunts and uncles and cousins around you all the time. You had a lot of grandparents in your home. A 10-year-old child at this time in history spent between 4 and 6 hours a day with a significant adult role model. Could be mom, dad, aunts, uncles, grandparents, other adults, that were in and around your home. But they had a lot of one-on-one time with adults. And those were a lot of people who really thought that you hung the moon. They really gave you good messages and taught you a lot of things about life and about right and wrong and those kind of things. We had a very rural society, and it was a very safe place to be when you were a child in this generation. Your parents worried that you would cut yourself, or you would do something stupid like children always do, like jump out of the barn window or off the roof, or get in a fight or something. But they didn't ever worry when you left the house and walked down the road to a friend's that you were going to get murdered, raped, kidnapped, accosted. That kind of stuff just really didn't go on very much at this time in history. And so it was a pretty safe world, you know. You could go out camping, you could have kids come over and sleep out in the backyard, and nobody really worried, you know, because it was a safe world. These are their core values. This is my mother and father's generation, and this is so true. They're very dedicated, hardworking people. They're very black and white people. Rules were pretty much developed to be obeyed, you know, and they were into delayed reward and patience and duty before pleasure, adherence to the rules, those kind of things. So they're pretty much conformers, this generation. So they learn, kind of interestingly though, and looking back at the way things were when they were growing up, new is not necessarily better, and this is definitely true with this generation. So some newfangled thing comes out and they're very skeptical. Well, I don't know if we need a microwave oven. We do just fine with the stove and a pan, you know? And so the whole idea of new technologies and new things, often they don't launch into these things until they've been around for a long time. So not real innovative with new ideas. They also like structure, schedules, procedures, and that's how they grew up, that's how school was when they came up, and that's how they like life. And they also have a certain amount of information in the brain. They process new information, has to filter into what they know in the brain. It has to fit into the big picture for them. Some of them refuse to work with technology. It's just too overwhelming. And other people in their 80s are buying computers, and they have cell phones and PDAs, and they're emailing all their friends every day, spending hours and hours online. So it kind of depends on the person. But they do want to be given clear expectations and guidelines, and that's how school was for them. And they do believe that you have to memorize the basics, because they were taught to memorize the basics. When they were in school, they were expected to work hard, and I know my dad, when he was in high school, his father finished the 3rd grade, and his mother, I think, finished the 6th grade. And so they basically told him, you know, you're lucky to not be home working. So he felt really like he was lucky to get to go to high school, let alone, you know, because if he wasn't, he would have been home working, you know, which is what his dad ended up doing when he was young. So they had that philosophy of children should be seen and not heard, and so there was not a lot of arguing with teachers. If you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home. But your performance in school at this time was based on your individual skills. You didn't get tested and compared to the class mean and the grade mean and the school mean and the district mean and all the things that kids are compared to now. They basically did their best, they got graded, and that was it, you know. They also had small classes. They had one curriculum for all people. Nothing special, no honors programs, no special ed kids in school. Getting some other kind of program, never tested with any kind of standardized tests, virtually never, you know. So when they got to college, almost no one went to college when this group got to college until the GI Bill. And when the GI Bill came along, they were popping up all over the place, and all of a sudden, dads started going to college. It was still a rare thing for a female to graduate from college at this time in history. But it did happen some, but the campuses were full of way more men than women. And they were in traditional teaching and learning environments where it was desks and the teacher was the sage on a stage, you know, and they were basically taught by content experts, and they were taught to be content experts. Because when you walked away from a university at the age of 25 or so, back in this time in history, you didn't have any place to go to get more information. You know, you didn't have, your local libraries didn't carry scientific materials for you. There was not an internet, there was not an easy way to get things, and so you tried to learn everything you could in college. You kept all your textbooks, you know, and it was a very different time compared to the way things are now. They really did believe you had to take the time to understand the material. This group, when they took statistics, actually learned what was in each statistic with math and figured out what went into each piece of the equation. Kids today learn SPSS, and it just says statistics all, and you enter, and there it is, you know. So they don't really have to learn how everything works, and don't feel they have to understand all these formulas. We just know things work, you know. So this is the way this generation went through college, though. As employers or as employees, if they're working with you as faculty, they're very loyal company men, and they expect the same in return. They believe they should get rewarded for how long they've been there. not how productive they are, not for performance necessarily, but for tenure. And their work ethic has to do with, efficiency and hard work. And they are not people who buck the system. They pretty much try to make things better for the good of the whole. And they are very uncomfortable with conflict. They really, really don't like to have people that don't get along, and they're not particularly change-oriented. So this generation is dying off at about, I think, 1,000 a day. We're losing veterans. We've lost a good deal of them already. And the generation that came along behind them, when the veterans came home from World War II after being gone for quite some time, started having babies like crazy, So they birthed the largest generation ever born in U.S. history. And there were 84 million baby boomers born between about 1943 and 1964, and they're idealistic. Are you surprised that they're idealistic? And there are generations that have come along after them that are probably larger, but that's due to immigration. This is the largest generation born in history. And they had a really excellent childhood too. They grew up at a time when divorce reached its all-time low. So most boomers grew up in intact families with two parents. Their fathers, though, got the GI Bill, a lot of them, and all of a sudden, we had GI housing and GI track housing built in parts of the country, and you could get a GI loan or a veteran's loan to buy a house, and everybody growing up and moving in with the grandparents and living on the same block started not happening anymore. And the industrial kind of revolution came along with all the industry coming up in America, and people started moving because the philosophy of the veteran generation was that you go where the jobs are. And so what happened is everybody moved. I mean, my mom and dad's family were from Missouri, and my dad went to Oklahoma and got a job in the oil business, and we moved to Oklahoma and lived there forever, And so all the kids on my block, none of them had grandparents that lived in that town because all their dads had moved to take jobs, in industry. So we moved around a lot, and we were the first generation to really live quite a distance from our extended families. I mean, maybe only 50 or 100 miles, but still you could only see them on weekends, or ever so often. So we didn't grow up with all that extended family around as the generation before. We had smaller families. Instead of 3 to 4 kids, we went down to 2 to 3. And we had very few grandparents in the home, though. So that was we started the phenomena of moms actually staying home for the baby boomers. Because before that time, we had apprenticeship and farming type businesses, and mom worked on the farm and in the house and in the apprenticeship business alongside dad. I mean, the whole family worked in the business, And so when you move a family off somewhere, you have no extended family. Who's going to watch the kids? So moms started staying actually home without work to do around the home, So kids were still spending a significant amount of time every day with adult role models, but it was mostly their mother, instead of it being that big, broad, extended group of aunts and uncles and grandparents. The world was still safe for boomers, though. Boomers could get on their bikes in the morning, and your parents would say, "See you at lunch," and off you'd go with your friends, and we could get out and do anything. But I think we also went through kind of a cultural adjustment in moving from an environment where we had all those adults around kind of supervising kids to where our fathers were working and carpooling off somewhere, and only mom was home supervising kids. And moms weren't particularly good at it yet at this time in history. And a lot of baby boomers, when we get together and talk, we don't know where our parents were the whole time we were growing up. They were never out watching us. We were doing things that we should not have been doing. We were getting in trouble. We used to play in the storm drains during lightning storms and stuff. And where was my mother? I don't know what she was doing, And my cousins and I all, were sledding on a hill one time, and we got cold, so we burned up the barricade that the city had placed. We chopped it all up. And there were like 8 adults in the house right there next to us, and not one of them ever came out and checked on us, So we're thinking, I think it's a miracle that most of us made it through childhood without having some kind of disaster happen, because our parents really weren't around watching. And I think because of that, boomers sort of reacted a little bit differently when they started having children of their own, But here are their core values. They're very optimistic. This is really a glass is half full generation, and they're team-oriented. They like to do things, and I say it's when the community college system got started in America in the 60s, most of the people coming out of college were boomers that entered into the community college system, and it is their fault that we have teams and task forces and caucuses and all, because you can't get anything done without some group coming together to talk about, because they're team-oriented, you know. They're also into personal growth, health and wellness, and personal gratification, and youth. It is for baby boomers that we have Botox injections and all kinds of stuff, women, and it's not just the women. Men are exfoliating and dyeing their hair and getting manicures and pedicures and, you know, other things like that, because we have that same philosophy Christy Brinkley does, which is I don't mind being the age I am, I just don't want to look it, you know. So we're doing everything we can to stay young looking and to stay healthy and fit so that when we retire, you know, we have an active, healthy life. And then when boomers, you know, kind of came up through the 60s, we were dancing around with flowers in our hair and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But then once they moved into adulthood and chose a career, they have become workaholics. And so it's boomers who have kind of defined what workaholism means. And we don't have, we obviously are forgetting that our forefathers worked very hard and picketed and rioted and all kinds of things so that you would not have to work more than 8 hours a day. And now you're doing it for free. And your children are looking at you saying, you know, are you getting paid for this? And you have to say, no, I just get paid for an 8-hour day. And they're kind of like, what's so smart about that? And they're telling their friends, look at my mom, she works all the time. You don't want to do that when you grow up, you know. So they're using you as an example of what not to do with their friends, because boomers just work. Everything's about work. And you say, oh, well, I go home at 8 hours, but I know you sit with your laptop in your lap and answer email and grade papers and work on things the whole time that you're supposedly watching television. And I say that because I do the same thing. But it's really true. They're very much work, and to the point where I just saw a study last night on the news that they're not really retiring because they really do have the feeling of I am what I do, therefore who am I if I do nothing? And so when you get up to be close to the age of retirement, they've developed what they call the encore career for baby boomers, which is that other thing you've always wanted to do your whole life. So you retire as a teacher, and next week you start your own jewelry business, or you open a flower shop, or you become an interior designer, or you go back to school and become a veterinary assistant, you know. I mean, they just start into a whole new career. And they never retire really and just sit on the porch in the rocking chair. That's not something that boomers have ever wanted to do or aspire to. So they're very much into work. They're very involved in their community, in their work, in their children's lives, to the point it's kind of scary. And almost everything that goes on in their lives, they're very involved because that's just the way they are. They were idealistic. They also were the first generation in the 20th century to have a generation gap occur between them and their parents. And they were honestly lied to. We were lied to a lot about Watergate, about drugs. Nobody knew much about drugs, so they made up a bunch of stuff to try to keep you from using drugs. And you figured out that was a lie, you know. And so we got told a whole lot of things that really weren't true. And so we began to really question authority. And we're skeptical, of politicians, and we're skeptical of people in authority in certain areas because we've just seen it not be true before, you know. So we didn't get along very well with our parents. When boomers went to college, they kind of left home and didn't look back. And they really are raising their kids very different than the way that they were raised. Boomers want things to fit into the big picture too when it comes to how they learn. And they also really like to have recognition for their success. So if they do things well, they like to get recognized for what they do well. In fact, as faculty members, baby boomers usually have what we call the Baby Boomer Wall of Fame. And all those plaques you guys are getting here are all on your Wall of Fame to show everybody all the things you've done. They're the cheapest group of people in the world to validate and reward. Print off a certificate, a $1 frame. You're the best, you know? And their whole wall is full. Yeah. The generations before are like, you know, I mean, they come after you like, what is this? Where's the money? You know, kind of thing. So the boomers they really do like to be recognized for everything they've done. They work well in groups. They also are the only generation in the 20th century who likes to have the opportunity to explore different opinions and viewpoints and stuff around a subject. When we were in college, I remember we had courses like altered states of consciousness you could take in the psychology department, and we love to talk, we like to be deep thinkers, not necessarily critical thinkers, but deep thinkers. And the generations that come along behind you when you start trying to get them to look at things from multiple perspectives say, just tell us what's on the test. We don't care about all this, It's, they call you hippies, you're a hippie because you want to do that. So that's one of those real different things about boomers, They do follow instructions well. I mean, they were kind of raised to, follow the rules and follow instructions. And they're also content experts because they've been taught at the university to be a content expert by people who are content experts. And so they're very good with their content. Now, their educational experiences were real interesting because they were such a huge generation, probably twice the size of the one that came before them, and they just overwhelmed the school system. In 1948 or so, when the first 5-year-olds showed up for kindergarten, there were twice as many of them all of a sudden as we had in previous years, and it was just awful. I mean, it took years to build schools and to get faculty trained and to get, classrooms to where they were down to a reasonable size. And we were the first generation that ever got ability groups. And remember that in the first, second, third grade, you had the red birds and the blue birds, and they always acted like they thought you couldn't tell which group you were in, but you knew. We did question authority, but we did respect people based on their position. And we had a lot of emphasis on teamwork. Working together in teams. We also need silence to concentrate, and we're the last generation that does, which is kind of also hard for us because we think we're wanting to tell everybody shh, shh all the time, and they're like, what's with that? So we also want to feel valued. We had pretty much a plain vanilla curriculum still, except some schools had honors courses in a few areas, and we still didn't really have special ed students regularly in our schools across the country. A few innovative school districts did, but special ed children were still not mainstreamed or even in segregated classes in our schools for the most part. We also got tested a couple times, but not real often like the kids who came along behind us did. So school was, a little bit more relaxed environment for us. When we got to college, you talk about something that changed about the time boomers came around. It became a very scary place, There was all kinds of turbulence on campuses and marching and picketing and people streaking naked across your campus. And, drugs and sex and rock and roll and all the things going on. I think thank goodness our parents were paying no attention to anything we were doing, because had they, none of us would have been left at the university, you can guarantee. If they had actually known what was going on, they would have taken us right back home. So there were a lot of things that went on at the time. And we were basically told that, I can remember being told this in class by a professor, that look to your right, look to your left, by the end of the semester, one of those people won't be here. And basically that's okay with us as faculty because there's more people waiting in line to get in right behind you. So we were never taught that we care about your success. Are you kidding? We never heard that once. It was like basically, move through the ranks, moving on, come on, moving on, was kind of the way it was. So we had a lot of emphasis on self-exploration and mind expansion and philosophizing in classes as we talked about. And we aspired to be intellectuals. So we wanted to be really good content specialists and really know a lot about our field. We left home, we never looked back. Unlike our generation today who comes home every weekend or every other weekend, is talking on the phone to you 3 or 4 times a week. I hardly ever talk to my mother, and I think we went home mid-semester and at Christmas, kind of thing. No going home every weekend. So we still were taught memorization of the basic things, and skills were built upon skills, which is also a math thing, So it was a good subject for boomers. And we were taught by content experts again. And I keep mentioning this content thing because it's becoming an obsolete thing now because of the way the world is. But it's the way we were taught when we were in school. As faculty and staff, we have a lot of faculty, and the majority of them are boomers still, and the youngest are around 46, the oldest are around 68, so you can see that, in fact, how many of you are baby boomers in this audience? Look around. Right, so don't you like that picture? of the baby boomers' work ethic. They always share their experience about what's happened to them in their life to people because they think what's happened to me is relevant to you, which you all have realized by now that the younger generation does not believe is true. They're like, we don't really care how you got where you are. They do value stability and respect, and they like to see their successes, as we mentioned, and the whole issue around workaholism has really become a big issue with them. They're also competitive, and when technology came along, because it's kind of all really come along since boomers were small, they loved the idea of how much easier it makes things, but they also carried backups with them for a long time because they were afraid they would break it. You know, they always carried transparencies for a long time, just in case the PowerPoint doesn't work, you know. And so they're pretty much adapted by now, but we still have some folks in this group that just don't want anything to do with technology, and they only check their emails like once a day, you know, or they're very rigid about it, and it bothers the students a lot. At work, they're very long hours showing commitment. They're relationship builders. They like to do things in teams. That's why they all drive minivans, not for their kids, but so they can take their whole peer group with them when they go to lunch. Not particularly budget-minded, which is hard for a lot of them, and they're very sensitive to feedback. I've known some that they just hate student evaluations because you get one negative comment, and that's all you can think about. Who cares that your mean scores were 4.9 on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 or 2 negative comments is enough to just ruin your day. So they really are very sensitive to feedback. Now, when the late veterans, the ones who did not give birth to the boomers, but the late veterans and the early boomers, the ones who were probably born in the 40s and the very early 50s, sort of decided to give birth at traditional ages instead of waiting till they were in their 30s, which is what happened to the second half of the baby boom. And that generation, that's who gave birth to Gen X. And Gen X is born from about 65 to 81, and they are a lost generation, a wandering generation, a nomadic generation, and they're sandwiched in between two loud, noisy generations, and nobody will pay us any attention, you know, because they're just in the middle. They're half the size of either ones on either side, and so try, you know, overpowering anybody when there's 41 million of you, 84 million and 81 million, you know, on either sides of you. So you're a sandwich generation. And they're reactive. They're reactive. Now, how many of you guys are Gen Xers? Yes. I want to apologize to you for the way you were raised right now. Because life in America was at its worst at the time you all were children. And, you know, we had gone through a lot of kind of change and things, and it kind of all came to a head about the time that Gen X was born and being raised. So divorce reached its all-time high when you guys were small, and parents were divorcing, and kids were growing up with single parents or step-blended families and spending weekends at one parent, or some of them even things like 3 weeks with one parent, 3 weeks with the next, you know, all kinds of crazy kind of custody situations. Early childhood education launched with you as the guinea pigs. We had no daycare centers in America until Gen X came along, and it was through necessity that we got them, because all of a sudden mothers needed to work because now I'm divorced and I have these 2 kids, and what do I do with them? So we had a lot of latchkey kids from that generation, you know, that were letting themselves in after school with a key. And when you went home, you let yourself in and locked the door, and you called your mother immediately and said, Mom, I'm home. And she wanted to know, told you what chores you had to do and to get your homework done and what you could have to eat. And the thing was, you couldn't go out till she got home, and you were not supposed to let anybody in the house until your mother got home. And so we had a lot of issues around that. But these kids started, a lot of them going into daycare, you know, for the first time ever. But we didn't know a lot about early childhood education, and it was pretty bad at first as far as how many teachers to students we had, and, you know, some of the things. It's far, far, far better now. So children were not as valued in this generation because of the way society was, and they were kind of a hardship to their families. And while nobody ever told them that, they kind of figured that out along the way, that they were making things harder for their parents. They also were spread out now because the generations before them had started moving around in the country, and so kids had no other relatives living close by that you could go home after school with. And the average family size dropped down to 1.7 kids. And so we had much smaller families, and the world was now very unsafe. You were afraid as a parent to let your child out of your sight when they went to the park. No more getting on your bike and riding off clear across town for the entire day. If your kids wanted to ride their bikes, you felt like you had to sit outside and watch them. If they wanted to go to the park, you had to go with them. And so it started curtailing a lot of their activities, and they were spending a lot more time indoors because of this, because of what was going on in society. The average 10-year-old child at this time in history spent 14 and a half minutes a day with a significant adult role model. 2 generations before, 4 to 6 hours a day. So the research says 13 minutes of that time was spent reprimanding them. Yeah, for things they should have done or could have done, differently or whatever. So, but you have to think about it, what life would have been like. You have a couple of little kids, you're a single parent, you work 8 to 5, they have to go to daycare in the morning, you have to pick them up at night. Morning, there's no positive time in the morning. Everybody's rushing around trying to get your book bag, get your lunch, get your this, get your that. And at night, the mom comes in, the kids are, there's homework to be done, there's a meal to be cooked, there's laundry to be done. I mean, life became very chaotic for a lot of children who were growing up at this time in history. So they have become a very conscientious, pragmatic, self-sufficient generation who really just doesn't need you people. I mean, if the more independence they have, the more they can control of all the things in their life, the happier they are. And they are pretty ruthlessly focused on the bottom line for most of the things that they do. They were at the bottom of our social priorities at the time they were raised. And they basically learned, if you want to get something done, you have to do it yourself. If you want to be happy, you have to make your own happy. If you want to, do so-and-so, you have to make that happen for yourself. So they've learned they can rely on me. And so they tend not to want to rely on other people. They have small numbers of very close friends they would die for, but not huge, big teams of friends that they run around with. They're not active voters. They're not active participators. They're not joiners. They're hard to get into clubs like Rotary and Kiwanis and things. But they're very hands-on. So if you want them to be philanthropic and to get involved in the community, they would rather actually work in the soup kitchen or build a habitat home or actually get in and rub elbows and get their hands dirty. So that's kind of how they've ended up being. Now, they are task-oriented and they like to learn new skills. Speed is important to them because for the first time when they were kids, they had Tandy and Apple computers on their desks, and they started using technology to help speed things up. They had calculators. They had a lot of things that those of us before didn't really have till we were much older. So they learned to do things faster. And they also went to school at a time where they had a lot of self-paced learning and independent learning, and this is also contributing to the independent nature of this generation. They do want to have fun while they learn, and they are probably interested in replicating that in their classroom as teachers, but they like informal work environments. They don't like rigid structure. They hate group work. And they want feedback constantly from their teacher. This was the first generation who talked to adults as peers, and so they don't have much trouble really talking with adults. Generations before them did. As their educational experiences, they again learn to rely on themselves. They distrust authority as well. They like challenging environments. They won't stay with you if it's not challenging. They'll leave. And they want to get feedback on their progress, like we said. They want to do things their way. They like no rules, freedom on assignments. Even if you tell them a way to do it, they may try their own way first, to see if I could do that faster. This generation did have special ed classes in their schools and started having multiple kinds of programs that they could get into for the first time. And they had a lot of funding cut to education. And the reason why was because we went from having 84 million children to 41 million children. And when all the classrooms cut in half, because that's the biggest thing that really predicts growth in education, whether it's K-12, it's P16 basically, is births, the 5 years before, the 6 years before, the 8 years before. And it predicts how many students will be coming into your schools in elementary schools. And so it cut in half. And so all of a sudden they needed half the teachers, half the classrooms, half the schools. So funding got dramatically cut. And as they do, they always cut programs like music and PE and stuff first, trying to save as many schools as they can. So it was a crazy time to go to school when you were a child. Testing mania started here. These kids started getting tested. A couple times a year in every grade in 3 or 4 subjects, they started getting tested. And daycare centers came up, and a lot of these kids began to go to after-school programs when they got out of school. When they got to college, again, numbers had dropped dramatically. And there was a whole lot more emphasis on career education. We didn't have all the career choices in colleges. And see, the community college system got started in the late 60s, and so it was really taking hold about the time this generation got up there. And we were having more career education even at the university. So kids were getting more into that. Technology was rising to where you could actually go in and do searches in the library via electronics. They, of course, were CDs you had to check out and run through a computer that had to be updated periodically. There wasn't the internet yet. But they had fax machines and more common computers on everybody's desk. So they had a lot more extracurricular activities and structured activities and things to keep kids busy. And we started having, instead of one classroom doing the same thing all the time, we started breaking kids up in groups and having different activities. So it became a livelier, louder place to go to school when you were a child at this time in history. So when they move on to college, colleges really weren't ready for that, because they had always had a traditional environment at the university. But costs started going up because the numbers were going down, and we started having more financial aid come available. And it was just a very, very interesting time to go to school because, we had this career move, we had funding cut, we had a different kind of generation moving in, so things began to be very different. Now, as faculty and staff, this is a significant number of our faculty are Gen Xers. They're the second largest group we have, and we still have a significant number of students that are waiting until they're in their 30s to come back to school, or 40s or 50s, and those are Gen Xers that are coming back to school. Now, they're a little more cynical and pessimistic than the generation before them, but they are into work-life balance. They do not want the baby boomers' work ethic or hours of work or amount of time you spend on your job and career and those kind of things. They just don't want it. They do like technology, and they like it because it makes life easy and fast, and they can get more done. They're the ones who kind of were taught some of the programs that we have now that help, make your work a lot easier. And so for that reason, technology's been great to them. They believe that they should be rewarded for productivity, for how good of a job they do, on performance, not so much on how long I've been here, how many years of tenure I've got. And they also want as much control over their time, their self, their benefits, their future as they can possibly have. So if you can give them control in as many ways as you can, you'll make them happy as employees and as students. They are a little bit more impatient, have a little bit poorer people skills than the generation that came before them, though. Now, you see where we're going with the 3 generations coming up to the millennials. Millennial generation happened because parents kind of looked around and said, we have got to do this better. We have got to value family life in America. We have got to start paying attention to our children. We've got to start, doing whatever. So you had older parents all of a sudden, the parents from the boomers who waited till they were in their 30s or late 20s to have kids giving birth, and then Gen X reverted back to giving birth at traditional ages. And because of that, you had 2 generations giving birth at once, and they've birthed 81 million millennials. They're civic, participatory. They were born between about 82 and 2002, and they've been called by many names. And they will probably have, I'm wanting to say that my most recent look was 101 million of them or so, but we've had so much immigration into their age group that a huge number of them they were not born in America, but they're part of the generation. And I want to say I've done a lot of international work, and as I talk to people from China and from the Middle East, they say, our kids are acting just like this. So this is not just an American phenomena. It's really going on around the world, what we're starting to see. Things started changing for this generation. It became a little bit rosier world for them because abortion peaked and started to decline, poverty peaked and started to decline, divorce rate peaked and started to decline, homicide rates against children peaked and started to decline. You add to that a group of very well-informed parents who are teaching their child from the time they were born about safety, and kids are not getting in accidents. They're wearing helmets, they're wearing their seat belts, they're wearing knee pads and wrist guards when they get on their on their skateboards and stuff like that. These children are having a better time. They're not having as many injuries, they're not having as many deaths from accidents, and life is just a little bit better for them. Then you also add to them the infertility era, where parents have been trying and trying to have a baby, and finally they do. They adore this child. And we have so many children today in this generation who have been born through the help of fertility clinics because of the fact they had parents waited till they were in their 30s to give birth. And guess what? That's not what nature intended. It doesn't always work. And so sometimes when you wait that late, you have to have help to do it. So a lot of children are being born to parents who really had to get some help to have children. And so by the time they're born, they're just thrilled. So this is who the millennials are. 35% of them are non-white. 1 in 5 of them has at least one parent that's an immigrant, which means that they're speaking a different language in their home. They have different holiday traditions, feast days, fast days, all that. Best educated mothers in history. The ones born in the late 90s have better educated mothers than their fathers, and that's never, ever happened in America. And when you look at what happens to a child educationally, the better predictor is their mother's education than their father's education. So it's going to impact how many of them come on to college. They have better educated parents, period. And they grew up in a monumental financial boom until 2001. So all the time that this generation was starting to work and looking for jobs, there were wanted signs in every window in town. Getting a job was not that big a deal. And they're the safest generation we've ever seen. They've clocked them in private. They have highest seatbelt usage of any generation. And their parents have told them all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff from the time they were a little kid. When your child doesn't want to drink their milk, you don't say, well, honey, you drink your milk because I told you so, which is what our mother would have said. We said, honey, there's rickets. Let's go get on the internet and look at pictures of kids who have rickets, And believe me, when they see that, they drink their milk. My youngest son came home from school one day and he walked in the door and he said, Mom, did you know that the bus driver's lactose intolerant? And I said, what? I said, first of all, what does lactose intolerant mean? So he explained the whole condition to me. So I said, and then how did it come up on the bus? Well, he passed the ice cream man. And we all said, we wanted ice cream, and our bus driver said she couldn't have it. And we said, why? And so she told them. And these children, this is the most amazing phenomena, is that when these kids go through the why stage, guess what? They tell them. So when they come in your class, you're like, are you kidding me? I have to actually tell you the answer to every why that you ask me, because they really just want to know. And their expectation is when they ask you a question like, why are we doing this assignment, that you're going to actually tell them a good reason, and it better be good. Because I'm a what's in it for me generation, and if it isn't good enough, I'm not doing it. So, this is kind of how they've been raised. They were born to older parents, raised in smaller families. They've been plugged in since they were babies. They sat on their parents' lap and learned how to use the mouse, and they can, at the age of 6, you can have them program your VCR if you can't do it, or your DVD player, They expect technology to be free, and they will not hesitate to log on to your wireless site if it's not password protected. Because in their opinion, it's not password protected. You were asking for it, So they also think it's cool to be smart. That whole dumbing yourself down thing is kind of gone with this generation. They've also had cell phones since they were little kids, 8, 9, 10 years old, and so they've had them on them the whole time, and their parents never said to them, it's impolite to call somebody at home after 9 o'clock at night, like your parents told you. Never heard that, because nobody's watching me when I'm making phones. Any of you have college-age kids in this generation with cell phones? When do they make all their calls? Midnight to 4 in the morning. Texts, midnight to 4 in the morning, yeah. And they expect to have 4 or more jobs in their lifetime. They are not going to be company men. They're not looking to settle down in one place. They are into experiencing life. And they will move around. I have one who graduated with an undergrad in pre-med and immediately moved to Hawaii to surf. And he is living in Hawaii right now. Actually, right now he's traveling in India for 3 months with his girlfriend. And he has a college degree, and he's going to go back into a master's program in the next year or so, but he wants to have fun for a while. He wants to have some life experiences, and he doesn't have any debt, no marriage, no kids, doesn't own a car. He rides his bike, and he makes lots and lots of money as a waiter. So, that's what he wants to do. And really, he saved $25,000 living in Hawaii because he makes $50 an hour as a waiter. So, how can I implore him to get more education? So it's like, so they're very interested in where they live, and so cities are doing all kinds of things to attract them. If your city is revitalizing its downtown and starting to build interesting bars and local microbreweries and restaurants that buy from all local farmers and stuff, that's the millennials that want that. And they're trying to attract these young people to the town where you live. They also are civic-minded, and they are collectively optimistic, and they believe they will be great. And they have the lowest rates of pregnancy and smoking and drinking and sex and violence at school and all these things. It's on TV an awful lot, so we think it's very common, but it's really not. And they, if you don't believe that they're going to be great, you just ask them and they'll tell you. They're really good long-term planners, thinking about what they want to do with their career, but they're horrible short-term planners. They never think about things like, how am I going to get home tonight? Or they'll walk in your class and look around and go, are we having a test today? Because they forgot to look at the syllabus. They're really, really kind of amazingly interesting that way. So you find yourself having to remind them and tell them stuff more often because they don't, it doesn't register because it's, that's written down somewhere, And so they don't seem to do well with that. They've also grown up at a time when the customer service movement has moved across America to where everybody 24/7 is so concerned that you are happy with what you bought. And if you're not, you just call us and we'll give you a coupon or we'll give you a new one. We'll have the tech person online with you at 2 a.m. trying to figure out how you screwed up your computer. They're totally into service. And somehow they think when they come to the college that's going to happen. And it really doesn't, because we are not like 100% concerned that they're happy all the time. And they seem to think that you are. And if they're not happy with you, they'll go to the dean. And if they don't get what they want with the dean, they'll call the president's office. The things that the presidents get calls about. I had one tell me her president got a call one day from a mother who said, my daughter is standing in the student union and the soda machine will not take her quarters. Kind of thing. It's like, since when do we have, that kind of stuff come to the ear of the president? But if you miss, I can guarantee that when you guys get back next week, some of the students are going to be mad that you canceled class because they paid for that class, by golly, and you are not supposed to cancel it. And if you do it again, I'm going to the division director, because they have this want what they paid for thing. They do expect you to bend over backwards to please them. They're very savvy consumers too, and if there is a way to get into your college and take classes under the radar by being in a certain program code and not taking placement tests. And you've got to see this in math all the time. The college down the road has a different set of cut scores than you, so they go down there and take math because they figure out a way to undermine you here. They're very good at that, at figuring out how to stay under the radar. Now, the parents that they had are very well-educated, over-involved parents, and I call them outcome-based parents. They have things in mind for everything they do with their children. They want them to be Boy Scouts so they learn how to work in a team. They want them to do this so they learn how to do so-and-so, so-and-so. And they'll stop their children's play to process through what just happened here. Johnny said he was going to do so-and-so. Is that the best choice he had, And the kids are like, well, what do you mean, Mom? So they process through, they go, okay, you can play. So they're very trying to get their kids to get the most out of everything that they come in contact with in life. And boomers kind of rebelled against the parenting practices of their parents. And we grew up in very strict kind of, I won't say strict like discipline strict as much as we grew up in rigid kind of families where, how many of you had a big lunch on Sunday your whole life growing up? Yeah, how many of you had to have your hair shampooed and all that Saturday night and get ready for church the next day? How many of your mothers had a laundry day, a a day that she went to the market. This kind of stuff is like so foreign to life today, but this is how the boomers grew up, and we have just rebelled against that and said, no way, we're going to, even if my grocery day is Tuesday, I think they will take my money on Wednesday if I go, So we have changed all that. So we have made a very conscious decision to have relationships with our kids, to not just say because I told you so, but to tell them why, and to have these open lines of communication, because we know that when they get in trouble, we want them to contact us. My mother and father were the last ones I would have ever called had I gotten in trouble when I was in school, because I would have gotten grounded out of it, These kids are the first ones that you call. They'll call. So you tell them, call me if you get in trouble, and then the bad news is they call you when they get in trouble, and so then you're like getting phone calls at 2 in the morning, and I've been, whatever. So, but they call their parents. They're very close to their parents. They've explained to them all kinds of things, consequences for their actions. They've made lists with them. They've made, the positives and the negatives of all kinds of stuff to help them learn how to process. And they are very good at making decisions from very small ages. And the parents will allow them to have input into where we go on vacation and what kind of car we buy. And it would be a cold day in hell that my mother would have laid 3 outfits out on the bed and said, which one do you want to wear to school? My mother would have put an outfit on me and said, go to school, We've also really told them, because of the boomers and because of the Xers, penchant for not trusting authority, we've also sort of told them, you can't believe everything you read. Just because somebody says it on TV doesn't mean it's true. You can't believe everything you read on the internet. You really have to question what you see. You have to make up your own mind as to what you're going to believe. Those kind of things. How many of you said one of those kind of things to your kids? Okay, so we wanted them to question authority, but what's happened is they've become the most master set of negotiators you've ever seen in your life. And when they walk into your classroom and you lay out the syllabus, they say, this is a good place to start. And then the negotiations begin, right? Can we cut this assignment back? Can we have this due a different day? Can we have more, fewer references? Can we do it as a team? Can we, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. And they're always negotiating. And when one of them walks up to you, you need to put your used car salesman hat on and realize, oh, negotiation. Because you feel like you're really that they have this irrational sense of entitlement. And in reality, they're just negotiating, but you don't know it. And if you're not negotiating back, you get the unfair end of that. So remember that. They'll negotiate with anyone, and if they don't get what they want, they go over your head, because that's kind of what they've been taught. And everything is open for discussion. But their parents have done things like say, okay, I'm drawing a line in the sand, and we're not talking about this anymore. And they stop. But you don't expect to have to do that, do you? Have to say, okay, no more, we're not talking about this anymore. We're done contesting this one item on the test. You're going to live with my decision, So it's just very difficult with them. They also have spent a lot of time with adults. They love their parents. They think their parents are great. They would like to raise their kids as well as their parents raised them. And they're not afraid to talk to any adult as an equal. And so they like their parents' music. They have a lot of the same values. They like their parents' friends. They enjoy coming home and spending time. And they won't hesitate to state their position on something to an adult. And you're kind of thinking, man, you're only 17 years old and you'll stand up and say that? But they will, They will not hesitate to ask you, can I redo that assignment because I didn't understand it, kind of thing. That you would have never, ever done that when you were in college. They also, how they learn, they like to try it their way, and they're always looking for a better, faster, quicker way to do everything. And they prefer graphics before text, excerpts instead of full books. Many of them never read a full book in any class in high school. And so you give them a history class, it's got 7 books, and they're like, what, really? We're supposed to read all of them? Because that just never happened. They like small, fast processing technology, and especially things that are networked with the other kids in the class. They like that. They like round tables with electric plugs, wireless internet, and they'll send each other stuff across the table while they're working together on things they find on the internet and stuff. They want instant gratification. They want to be told, great job, spot reward for the things that they're doing. They have very selective attention, and as you're telling them something, when it becomes something, I don't think I need to know this, off goes the attention onto whatever's in their hands or whatever they're doing. And, because they've grown up in a time when everybody gets a trophy. And so they have that, we're going to all get a reward for every bit of work we do, whether it's good or not. And so that's a reality check for them when they get into some people's classes. They also focus on skill development, not memorization of the things they don't perceive they need to know. How many of you guys have college-age students that still don't know their multiplication tables? I mean, this is the biggest one I hear the biggest complaint about, is that they still don't know their multiplication tables. And they're kind of like, so? I have a calculator. 4 times 3 is, so it's like they don't perceive they need to know that stuff. Productivity is the key with them, not attendance. So you have to have class be worthwhile, or if they figure out they can do okay on the test without coming, they will. They will not come. They also have a different kind of critical thinking than you. They're good critical thinkers, but they just don't critically think like you. Theirs is based more on the high-tech world they live in. Yours is based on a common set of thinking skills. And so they need help with that. But don't ever assume that they're not critical thinkers, because they are. They're also pretty much into group thinking and interacting, but they're not good at organizing those groups and making all that happen themselves. So you have to sometimes format those groups, give them a charge, set them in motion, and then they'll work. Other times they end up doing everything by themselves. So now, when they were in school, man, you talk about a school system that's different. Nowadays, your child's getting ready to go to kindergarten. They can go to French immersion, Spanish immersion, the math science school, the language arts school, all these magnets with all different kinds of things. There's private schools, charter schools, religious schools. It's crazy. And they wear school uniforms, and we're totally into child safety and character ed and high performance standards, cooperative learning, all these things. This generation had to do community service to get out of high school, a lot of them, because it was required through some program they did. So we talk about getting in touch with your community. They're pretty in touch with their community. I mean, they've really kind of been involved with that, and they've had people come in and talk to them. Goal-oriented, very much what's in it for me, what can I get out of this? They're also interactive, participatory, and engaging. And they see the adults as facilitators, and adults have always consulted with them in school. And they've also had access to lots of things 24/7 electronically. They don't understand why you won't just give them your PowerPoint notes if you have them electronically. Why are you making us write all this down? Kind of thing. Because again, and if you have a good reason for that, it's okay. But if you just say, I'm not giving you my notes, that's not a good reason. Again, it's the why, and you have to give them a good answer. So when they got to college, they again had zillions of options. There was all kinds of things. And, they can become a early high school and a middle high school, and you can be a dually or concurrently enrolled student. There are kids who graduate from high school with an associate's degree already. So in their minds, where does one stop and the other start? I mean, it's a real confusing kind of continuous move. And so we expect them to understand stuff that they do not understand. And they make all the choices about what they're going to do and where they're going to go based on what's best for my individual child and for me, And so they do a lot of group activities. They've had things going on in classes that are very active and loud. They've had, and service learning and supplemental instruction, all the things going on at the universities and the community colleges trying to meet the needs of students is very different than it was 20 years ago. We also are assuming responsibility for the safety and well-being of all those kids in our schools. That was not usually the case before. If students had personal issues in their life, don't come talk to me as the faculty, go see a counselor. That did not come up all the time in class. It comes up all the time now. I mean, their complicated lives are the biggest issue that they have. And they also don't need silence to concentrate. And so they're used to, grabbing this in little bits of time and whatever here and there. They have also stayed home as long as they could. They don't want to leave their families. They love their parents, They've gotten a lot of do-overs, which then they come in your class and you don't let them have any, and they don't think it's fair. Lots of technology, very little tolerance for delay. If your Blackboard system goes down, what do you hear about it, I mean, it's just, and the thing is, they're really not very hardy, and they'll drop out very quickly, and especially if the teacher's rigid, and you say, well, why did you change majors? Well, it was hard, And that seems to be one of the excuses you hear a lot. It was hard. Well, math is hard. It's really hard for some people, but it's just one of those things. They also don't they dislike ambiguity. They want you to tell them what they need to know and what's on the test. And the biggest thing that's happening differently is now they're being taught by content experts in a day when all possible content's on the internet. And this is becoming a problem because any student could sit in your class with wireless connectivity and everything you're saying, they could type in a sentence and up would come an internet site with all the stuff on it. I got this quote from this professor at Harvard who said, once being a professor meant, among other things, possessing by dint of years immersed in library mineshafts, refinements on knowledge that were effectively inaccessible to the unlearned person. Now most of that esoterica is available instantly on Wikipedia. And so I think that's kind of what's true, all of that sitting in class and having these conversations and getting into it in class that used to be rich and the only place you could get it is not the case anymore. So our parents told us, things like when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And this group thinks when the going gets tough, it means you need to be somewhere else. And so you tend to see a lot of them, moving away, moving out. So also, something that we need to talk about with them is communication, because they text message you, email you, call you on their cell phone, and you need to make some decisions about what you're going to take calls, emails, and texts about, and they need to know how soon they can expect to hear from you, and what's a reasonable number of emails for you to receive from them in a certain time of day. Because math classes, if you're teaching 3, 4, 5 math classes, you have lots of students. And if they're all emailing you several times a day, you can't even get through your emails, let alone teach class. And so and half the time what they're emailing you about is something that they should not be emailing you about. They should be emailing someone else about. And then of course they're all coming from sexykitten23@aol.com, and you don't even know who they are, kind of thing. So this is another, issue about what you want a dear Dr. So-and-so, I am Lisa in your 9 a.m. class, and a closer at the bottom as to who they are and their contact information, because they don't do that, and you get these crazy emails. So this is becoming a problem. They're also ambitious yet aimless. They swirl, they come in and they stop out and they take some time off and they come back, and they're doing it in the workforce too. So we find them, by the time they get out of college, they've got transcripts from 4 or 5 places. They'll go take something in the summer and transfer it back in. They'll lay out for a while, And part of it is they're just not in any hurry to really grow up. The developmental psychologists have created a new developmental stage based on this generation, and they're what we call emerging adults. And you don't emerge into adulthood at the age of 18 or 21 like we used to think. Now it's age 28 to 31. And you're an emerging adult when you're in your 20s, and that's what they're doing. They're just kind of, swirling around and having some fun, doing what they want. Another issue I wanted to kind of talk about is we have a problem with the disappearing male in higher education. And I just want to I'm going to do this real quick. But we have couples that are seeking fertility clinics, are requesting female children 2-to-1 right now over male children. And we're finding that the issue of I have to have a male heir around the world is really declining. But I want to give you, because this is really becoming a problem in this generation. So for every 100 girls who does this, the second column is how many boys do it, okay? And this, I'll give you the link to the site too. But conceived, we have 115 boys for every 100 girls, but only 105 born for 100 girls. Die within the first 27 days, 125 to 100. Die after the first 27 days, but in the first year, 130 to 100. Die between ages 1 and 4, 5 and 14, 15 to 24, commit suicide between 20 to 24, or in correctional facilities, 22 to 24. Yeah, okay, now this is just life stuff. Now let's go to education. This is how many enroll in nursery school. So for every 100 girls whose parents put them in nursery school, only 98 boys' parents do. Enroll in kindergarten, now we have the 107 boys to 100 girls. Repeat kindergarten. Entry into kindergarten delayed. Now their parents, well, he's an August birthday, I'm going to put him in late. All right. 4th graders who do 1 hour of homework a day, only 92 boys for every 100 girls. Age 15 to 17 enrollment, that's below grade level, which means by the time they get to there, they've been held back at least a year, 130. Now, enroll in high school, 97 boys to 100. Enroll in the gifted and talented program, 95 boys to 100. Suspended, expelled, dropout, diagnosed with a learning disability, diagnosed with emotional disturbance, graduate from high school. Now, we're losing girls, you guys, so we're losing boys just way faster. Enroll in college, any college. Enroll in first year of college, second year of college, third year of college, fourth year of college. Earn an associate's, earn a bachelor's, a master's. Professional degrees, the only place boys are higher than girls, doctors and lawyers. Earn a doctorate. The link's in the presentation, but it's Ted Mortensen stuff at the postsecondary.ed.org site. This all comes from the Boys Project, and it's all backed up to census tables. So anyway, this is just becoming a problem, and we know by around 2013-14, 61% of all college degrees are going to go to girls. So you start looking at, well, what are colleges doing? You know, well, they're looking at social barriers and academic barriers and trying to come up with leadership skills and college skill development and things working specifically with males. Also creating male programs that have actual designated space and some staff. And they're creating special programs to address male issues. Or does this sound like the 70s when we had women's programs? Yeah. And so now they're doing this with male programs. And the last one is taking a real serious look at what we're offering as far as programs that are of interest to boys. Because, you know, so many colleges don't have the dirty programs, you know, welding and automotive and electrical, electronics and that kind of stuff, or engineering, or even some of the more male-dominated things that you tend to see. And they have early childhood education and nursing, big programs there. And so we're not attracting males. And this is becoming quite an issue. When it comes to math, I wanted to say we have some issues with math, and this is something I figure you guys can explain to me. But when you look at, this is fourth graders, this is off of the Nation's Report Card on the NCS site. If you're looking at the bottom, and the purple box is the percentage of kids who are proficient or advanced in mathematics in the fourth grade. So you can see that from 1990, it was only 13%, and it's gone up to 40%. So you go to looking at, well, I'm supposed to take this out, sorry. This one shows you fourth graders and eighth graders. But the point that I don't get is how come it is that eighth graders across the board have lower math skills than the fourth graders? Well, no, let me show you, because it's the true K-12. Here's the eighth graders. This is the raw PSAT scores, and you can see that, you know, things were going down in math, and then around 2007 it started to come back up. And the SAT scores in math are higher for this generation. Where the lines drawn is where the millennials started taking it. But when you actually look at a school district, oh wait, this is the ACT, says that by the time they are college-ready seniors, only 42% of them are at college level in math, which is lower than fourth grade or eighth grade. You know, it's getting, it's going down. And we looked at a large urban school district, and look at this, it's K first, second, third, across to eighth grade, and the math skills go down every year to the percentage that are at grade level. So the trend is that this year's eighth graders did better than last year's eighth graders, which did better than the year before's eighth graders. But every year you're in school, you're more likely in kindergarten to be proficient in lesson first, lesson second, lesson third, lesson fourth, you know, like so. So it's going down, down, down. So one of the things that this person says is that part of our problem is with, and this is true with math, is adapting a linear model for transmitting knowledge to a generation of students who are accustomed to dealing with multiple information streams in short bursts. Because math is not a subject that you can master in 30-second bursts here and there. And so I'm thinking that part of our issue is we have attention span issues being fed by technology in our society today, and it's causing students that, you know, it seems to get worse as each year goes on. It's not like when you have your lowest amount of skill in kindergarten. In fact, I'm sure you do, and it gets better, but when you're comparing to kids, the percentage that are at grade level goes down every single year. And then by the time they get to be college level, we only have 42% of them that ACT and SAT say are at college level in math. So it's no surprise that 60-something% of them need remediation, is it? When they come into our colleges. These got all out of whack. I switched them, sorry. What happens to you in math, though, is there's a lot of competition. It's their attention span is only so long, and they are getting all kinds of things coming at them, and especially when they're at home doing homework, that it's very hard for them to compete. Look at these differences in the generations when it comes to technology and communication use. And the ones I find the most interesting is the bottom one of people who have cell phones and no landlines, and the second to the bottom one, which is sleep with their cell phones nearby. But they say, you know, they believe that technology makes life easier and it makes people closer. Which I think a lot of us think, wait, they're all electronically communicating. They're not actually getting close to people. So it's kind of interesting, the perception of this generation is such that their socialization is so electronic, they think they're closer to people than people used to be. But having the social network sites, texting while they're driving, using their cell phones to text people, you can see that even the percentages of baby boomers and veterans, though, who are doing these things, it's getting higher than we thought it was. Here's some of the competition that you have. This is recently taken off of some of the Facebook sites and things, looking at what students are spending their time doing. Checking their sites 10 times a day. 22% of students checking Facebook 10 times a day. How many have posted things they've regretted, used the sites to make fun of other students? How many have been cyberbullied? How many have pretended to be somebody else online? Posted nude pictures of themselves online? This is really getting higher and higher every year. And the typical American teen sends 80 text messages a day. How many of those are in your class? Do you see them trying to do that in your class? Some of you probably have policies that keep them from doing that. But this is getting so hard because they'll put their phones on vibrate, but they're always pulling it out and looking to see, who's there. So this is all becoming just information coming at them all directions. It's getting harder and harder for students, I think, to concentrate. And math is one of those subjects that you have to grasp this before you can move to the next, and I think what we're finding is a lot of students aren't getting it, Some of the things we're finding that works with methods of teaching is, or things that we need to kind of pay attention to when it comes to methods of teaching is, there's an awful lot of reliance on technology in this generation for spell check, grammar check, their calculators, and they can't do a lot of the basic stuff that generations that came before them could. And so, my question always is this really a big deal? Because it is to most of us as faculty, because it's the way we were raised, But it's not necessarily in today's market. I mean, how often do you write stuff that you're not able to run it through spell check? I mean, how many of you really spend a lot of time handwriting long manuscripts or papers, Not really a lot anymore. So some of these things may not be a big deal. We have poor basic skills, though, in about anywhere from 30 to 70% of the generation, depending upon kind of what kind of family they grew up in, what kind of schools they went to, what kind of technology they had in their home. We have them showing up less prepared from K-12, and they are dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with, except they're even more complicated, I think, than ours because of the sheer numbers and the massive amounts of international students and the things that are coming toward us. Poor technology skills is something we're finding in a large percentage of these students because they use technology for socialization. They can Facebook, they can play Angry Birds, they can Google, they can do this kind of stuff. But when you say open Excel and create a spreadsheet, there's like, what? Because that's where we're finding that they're missing the technology skills that do work for them, that actually make their life easier, that help them do better in school. And we have a lot of first-generation students or generation 1.5 students that graduated from U.S. high schools, but their parents are immigrants, and they don't speak English very well. And I know while you all, I'm sure, say math is a universal language, it's a universal language written at grade 13, And so it's a polysyllabic vocabulary, and it's a very hard vocabulary for students who are from foreign countries to learn if they don't know. And then also immigrant families who have a lot of language issues. Some of the things that you can use is team-oriented kinds of things, and I don't mean just set them in teams and have them work together. You'll have to give them more direction than that. But if you give them good direction and play to their strengths, it really does work. They're also going to have to be lifelong learners in order to survive in this world, and they really are more lifelong learners than any generation we've ever had, because it's totally possible with them. And they've been finding their own stuff and digging for their own things and searching, and the way in which they go about looking for anything is so different. There's no hint that they're not going to keep that up through their life, because it's kind of the way that they are. They also like having some input into assignments, being able to say, well, here's 4 assignments, but the 5th one we're going to let you all create as a class, and let the students have some input into assignments, and they'll create harder assignments than you would. Also, things like offering team-assisted help, like learning communities, supplemental instruction, peer tutoring, peer mentoring, some of those kind of things really help them a lot as well. And then trying to civically engage them, because this is a generation who really values environmental things and community-based things and getting involved in those types of things. Also, setting up real-world assignments with them. They really like stuff that applies to life in the real world, and solving real problems and being able to take them out on field trips and work on solving real problems. Sometimes that really helps a lot. Structure groups, like I said, keep them informed of their progress as best as you can. They always want to know what it is, how am I doing in this class, how am I doing in this class? And so if you can create a way electronically for them to always just see how they're doing, they love that, because then they really know what's going on. And then also have a variety of activities going on so that it can kind of help them control the pace. So some of them who are faster than others can speed up a little bit. Also, they don't like everything to be done via technology. They'll say, this is just excessive. They like to have some just classroom things and some technology. So don't think that, they're just a whole tech generation, we want to do everything coming at them through technology. Because remember, there's a lot of them that have really poor technology skills. So if you do that, you're in trouble. They do like things to be posted, because if not, they're going to lose them. And they're not going to know when things are due. They won't be able to find the original syllabus if you hand one out. So they want things posted so they can find it again. And they are civic, so they do like to do things together. And they get along really well with all generations. So you can put them into groups with mixed generations, and they do really well. They get along really well with their grandparents and stuff. So they also like learning by discovery, and you do have to watch that attention deployment thing with them, where they'll stop paying attention when you are doing something that they don't find interesting or they don't think they need to know. They also need the ability to sift and analyze and reflect on large amounts of information. This is what life is today. This information literacy piece is really, really critical. How do you know a good source? How do you organize all this data that you get? How do you take care of that? A lot of faculty have told me they use scenarios in their class a lot to get students to process through the correct responses and correct answers and the incorrect ones as well, And then give them controversial problems that can be approached from several perspectives, and let them come up with, the different perspectives that they need for that. And then put the students in charge and allow them to lead, but don't butt in too much. So many learning communities in class. Teacher conferences with students are still great, because students still really like to get to know their faculty, and they don't always get an opportunity to do that. They also are interested in things that matter. If there's one thing they want, it's to have an impact on the world. And if you can explain to them how this matters, then it will matter to them. And they'll be attracted to careers where they feel like they can do things that matter, where they can make an impact on people's life for the good. And they're also very interested in the mission of the community college. And what we're finding is we have a lot of them joining our ranks as faculty now. And so we are talking about students, but we have lots of them as faculty. In fact, are some of you millennials in this room? Yeah, good. See, we do have quite a few. And so they're going to come to the community college because they're interested in the mission, because this mission makes a difference, doesn't it? And so they're going to be very attracted to it. Each generation has been influenced and molded by the society that raised them. So I just want to kind of go through this for fun, and this is my closing. So you're a child of the 50s if you wore a poodle skirt, or you know what paste tastes like. Or your sneakers were made of canvas and only came in black and white. Your family had only one telephone and it was black and only one telephone number. Gas stations pumped your glass, cleaned your windows, and gave you green stamps. Yeah. And you remember when gas was 19 cents a gallon. And your jeans were called dungarees. And you never heard of McDonald's unless you lived in Des Plaines, Illinois, right? You're a child of the 60s if you own several tie-dyed pieces of clothing. Someone asked you to join the revolution and you actually would know what that meant. You wore bell-bottoms and headbands. And you slept with an attic fan. Remember those? You had a collection of 45s. You rode in cars that, when I say without seatbelts, I mean they didn't have seatbelts. You tracked John Glenn around the world in grade school the first time. I left the second N out of his name. You ate in a McDonald's with indoor seating, which was a brand new thing for hamburger stands. Because remember, you used to always go up to the window and you had to eat outside. You're a child of the 70s if you had to get off the couch to change the TV. And you wore leg warmers, and you ever asked somebody to gag me with a spoon. You recognize the phrase, and my name is Charlie, and they work for me. And you have at least one school picture with your collar turned up. And you know the words to all of Weird Al Yankovic's songs. And this was your first calculator. And you went to McDonald's for the brand new breakfast item called the Egg McMuffin. All right? You're a child of the 80s if you know who shot JR. And you know the philosophical meaning of wax on, wax off. And there was really nothing questionable about Bert and Ernie living together. And if the feeling in your thumb has just now returned after holding down your Atari joystick, and you needed a grocery cart to carry your first portable stereo, and you went to McDonald's for the Happy Meals. You're a child of the 90s if you know the Macarena, and if you had a Trapper Keeper, and you know where Waldo is, and you actually can name the Spice Girls, and you owned a Razor scooter, and you used to end sentences with not or psych. And you watched The Real World on MTV and thought that was so cool. And you learned to rollerblade, not roller skate. And you went to McDonald's to play in the play space. You're a child of the 2000s if you are still a child, okay? And you have quite a life ahead of you. You cut your teeth on your mother's cell phone, literally. You Skype with your grandmother. You've been working on a computer since preschool days, and your mother probably won't let you eat at McDonald's. Yeah. Unless you get the apple slices and low-fat milk option while she's having a cappuccino at the McCafe. Okay. Questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Terry. That was very informative and very entertaining. Just a couple real quick announcements. For people who still want to do the T-shirt drop-off, that will be at the outside the exhibit hall. And we have one foundation drawing, which we're going to do here. The other winners will be announced at the delegate assembly. There is still time to give to your region. So, Terry, would you do the randomly selecting? This is for a free AMATYC membership. And the winner is Michael Pemberton from Maysville Community and Technical College. So Michael, please step up, come up here and get this after you're done. Again, a big thank you to our breakfast speaker, Dr. Terri Manning. Enjoy the rest of the conference.